Hey, are you ready to grow your business? You have checked out the number one resource for business leaders, entrepreneurs, startup founders, and managers. And we're going to teach you how to grow and scale your business with real actionable steps. There's no fluff in this podcast. It's just good advice. Check out this episode. If you're a first-time listener, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. And if you enjoy this episode, leave us a 5-star review. Today's episode is with Christopher Hamze, who's the founder of Teelaunch. He's also an e-commerce and entrepreneurial pro. We're going to be talking about his journey with Teelaunch and also some of the takeaways that you can apply to your own business as well. Stay tuned. Here comes your good advice. Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Good Advice Podcast. We're going to be talking today about really the journey of entrepreneurship, the journey of your startup. We'll be sitting down with Christopher Hamze on the podcast today. He's the founder of Teelaunch. It's a business that partners with a number of e-commerce stores to really help produce their products, to print their products, and they connect them with warehouses and distribution centers all over the world. We're going to be talking about Teelaunch's journey today, and I think you're going to love this story because there's all sorts of insights that are going to help you on your journey. And in fact, if you're running an e-commerce store, you're probably going to end this podcast thinking, I need to go check out this website. I need to go look and see what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. Chris, it's great to have you on the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, I gave sort of my little spiel on who you are. I'm glad to have you, by the way, on the podcast. Go ahead and tell us, who are you? What do you do for a living?
Yeah, so Christopher Hamze. So about 8 years ago now, we started Teelaunch. And so, it's one of those things where we knew we loved e-commerce and we wanted to find a way to help other people do it. And so in the early days, before print on demand, to start an e-commerce store was a lot of money. It was a lot of investment. It's a lot of time. And now with using print on demand, anybody, anywhere can, have a store running in, under 10 minutes.
Well, and I love how you have filled the niche a bit with your business in that if I am, let's say, 10 years ago, if I'm starting an e-commerce store and I'm trying to create a product or, whatever it's going to be, I have to go through all the agonizing effort of, who's going to make my product? How do I actually get it produced? Who's going to print it for me? And you guys have done a great job of filling that support role in a way that really makes sense, especially for considering how easy it is to actually start an e-commerce store. I can see how you guys have filled a really important need.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's been really gratifying because it's really shown that there's so many people out there that have the desire, but before they'd have to spend, thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours to kind of just start and see if people even want their product. And now they can, test ideas on, on a weekend and know within a day or two, whatever they've created if people want it. So with no risk.
Yeah, and Teelaunch you bootstrapped it, right? Yeah. Which tell me about that. I feel like every founder today is like so energized around VC funding and how do I find the investors? And it's always special when you talk to someone who they built their business themselves, they paid for it themselves. So talk to me a little bit about what that journey was like.
Yeah, it's definitely the road less traveled. So, we've had many opportunities to get funding, but I've just seen it change too many companies. They go down the wrong path because the metrics the investors find important are not the metrics that I find important. At the end of the day, it's not how much you make, it's how much you keep. So this idea that, these guys have of going negative for years and years and years, and obviously it's worked out for, companies like Amazon, but not everybody's on Amazon. And I just don't feel like going into the red makes any sense. So yeah, for us, we've, literally nothing. Bank loans and credit cards and luckily it paid off. But yeah, it's been a real interesting ride.
So you've been in business for, I think it was 8 years now. You've fulfilled over 4 million items. 8 years later, do you still love what you do?
I do. Yeah, it's the business is evolving at such a rate where it's never boring. It's not, the way like things used to move 7-8 years ago, like you'd have an innovation every year, every other year. Now it's every month something changes, and there's a lot of competition now. So everybody's trying to get that edge of like, how do I produce for cheaper? How do I do something that no one else has done? And it's kind of it's a unique thrill and a high to kind of be in the pack of those competitors trying to do the same thing.
So I was reading about your bio and how you've been an entrepreneur for a while, had a candy shop at the age of 8 years old, and that you helped grow your family's pizza business, which we shouldn't have recorded this around lunchtime because now I'm just craving pizza. Was creating Teelaunch sort of a natural progression of your entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, it was probably inevitable. Like in the middle there, I tried not to be an entrepreneur. So I went to, undergrad and law school, and I got my MBA, and I thought I'm just going to get a regular job because the struggles I saw, from age 0 to 25 were like, that's not for me. And I tried it and I couldn't do it. So kind of just fell back into
what was it about it that just didn't click for you?
Charging, per minute for my time just felt almost like weird, I couldn't do it. So you'd feel bad for the people who didn't have it, and then you just felt like if I was a business owner, would I pay this guy $300 an hour? Then and I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. So the idea of like selling something for $1 and it cost me 50 cents, that just seems, for me, that was the only thing I could swallow. So
is it weird not using your law degree?
I use it all the time. I just don't use it for other people. So it was definitely, I don't think it was worth $100,000, but it was definitely, it's helpful because it gives me a unique perspective on things that I wouldn't have known otherwise when I got into this, because think about most people starting a business so it would have been 28, like you don't know anything. But since I spent all that time in school, I knew much more than the average person would at that age. So.
Well, it's definitely a barrier for people who are thinking about entrepreneurship. They're thinking about their business, and they're maybe in an entirely different industry, and they're thinking, well, I don't want to waste my experience. I don't want to, venture into new territory. But it does seem like kind of what you're saying, that like, even when you make a big change, you still find ways to use that knowledge in some way.
Definitely. Like I'd even say so, my family had restaurants my entire life up until a year ago. And so even they think, is making pizzas and answering phones, is that helpful to Teelaunch? It definitely is, because those things you learn about people, customer service, just all these different things, they all have an impact in unexpected ways in every aspect of your business. So
speaking of customer feedback, I was looking at your website. You guys have an app, which I feel like that's always a great milestone for any business like your own. And I was reading through some of the reviews, and I think what was really admirable was you have plenty of amazing 5-star reviews, but naturally, everyone wants to see the 1-star review. And I was looking at a couple of the 1-star reviews, and I thought your responses were really great because a lot of times in business, when you get harsh feedback, the temptation as the founder or the business owner is to be like, well, what do they know? That these guys are crazy. And because sometimes you really do have that customer who's just nuts. And your response, I think, was so great, which was basically, hey, it's always hard to hear feedback, but we're so grateful that you left it. Talk to me a little bit about how you handle feedback and how you use it for your business.
Yeah. So, it's never easy. Like that bad review you're talking about in particular, it keeps me up at night. But because we actually, for those, so we had 3 bad ones recently, and they all had the 2 pieces of feedback. And within a week, we implemented their changes and made it live in the app. And so it's a bit frustrating they wouldn't give me a week to help them. But we definitely take it all to heart, because we're not big enough to be arrogant about our service or our offering. Like, I am the first to admit our failures, because that's how we've survived. Like, we have some very, very big competitors. One recently just got, $130 million in funding. And they're just giants, but we've kept alive because we really do provide more access. I would say better customer service. We listen to our customers, and we really want to make this a collaborative process, because it's crazy the things I've learned from customers by just having conversations that I never would have known, because I don't see every nook and cranny of the internet. But when you have hundreds of thousands of customers, like, you just learn from them. And so we definitely want them to realize that we understand and take all criticism to heart and try to make our product better.
What's like the secret for the startup founder to because you said something I think that's really valuable, and it's basically you're letting your customers shape the product and sort of shape the innovation of the product as you continue to iterate on it. What's the secret to being open to that? Because there's some founders out there who their answer to this question is, my customer, and they wouldn't necessarily say this, but my customers are idiots. They don't know what they want. Or maybe not even so much that harsh about the customer. Maybe they say something like, well, I know my customers want that, but that's not the product I set out to build. That's not the version I envisioned. What's the secret for being more in line with your perspective?
I mean, we've gone against the tide and kind of like thought, okay, we know better. And the last 8 years, I realized that it's gone wrong many, many times. So now we've learned like, just really, and if it's a small thing, like, those two particular piece of feedback where, I mean, it only took a few hours to implement. So it's like, if it's something that could be done and it makes sense, we're going to do it. If it doesn't, we have a conversation with the customer and try to if we can explain to them why this doesn't make sense and they agree with us, we usually, we feel good not doing it. But if we can't convince, them that this is the right path, we usually take another look at it and say, okay, how can maybe we don't give them exactly what they want, but how do we give them, how do we achieve the same goal they're trying to achieve? Because that's really at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how it's done. It's like, what's the goal? Why are they upset about this piece of functionality? Because one thing we do kind of, don't like hearing, obviously, is like, oh, this app does this or this app does that. It's like, it really doesn't matter what other apps do what. Like, we don't need to be our competitors, but we need to be, what, is true to us, true to them. And so we kind of just, it's hard. It's really hard because there'll be some people that are just dead set against this is the way to do it. And it's not the best for them. Like, for example, customers want to upload any size file. It could be a teen time file, it could be completely going to look bad on the shirt. And so we kind of try to error-proof our processes, and obviously it doesn't make everybody happy because they're like, hey, just use it. I don't care. And when they get it, they're going to be unhappy. So we do have to kind of push back in some ways to make sure that we kind of protect them from themselves.
And I like how you put that. I do think there's value in sort of that friction your customers feel, like pushing back on that in a way to ultimately help their end product not be awful. Because naturally, you're the one who pays for that whenever, comes back around. I imagine getting, obviously sometimes you get a negative review. I imagine that then on the flip side, getting the really great reviews, it's a great boost to, the energy around like, this is why I do this. This is why I'm, doing what I'm doing. The products you have on your website, are those your customers' products or are those your own products?
So on the website, those are examples of just how we're printing. So all of our products on print on demand, they come blank. So it's whatever you want to put on them. So those are we used to have blank images on the site, but then people couldn't really visualize what a finished product looked like. And then so we changed it now to have, example images of everything we make. My
favorite is the bath mat that says TP Crisis Survivor 2020. Yeah. So I saw that one and was like, ooh, that's really good. So, okay, cool. Well, so in 8 years of running this business, is it hard to, because especially, you've been an entrepreneur pretty much your whole life. Is it hard to stay focused on this project as opposed to, I can't imagine you don't have different ideas that pop into your head, especially as e-commerce has continued to evolve and develop. How do you stay single-minded and focused?
I'm definitely not. So it all has to do, it's all related, but yeah, we have, a dozen other projects kind of running because what we're trying to figure out is what's the next thing? Like obviously e-commerce in its current form, has been that way for, 20 years, but there's something it's been, changing rapidly. Like you think about before how, now everybody buys on their phones, but that wasn't the case, 5 years ago. And then now people are actually, having transactions via WhatsApp and via text message. And so, yeah, we have a lot of like longer term projects. We're trying to figure out what's that next way of selling and how do we make sure that our system works really well to that new way. So has, in terms of like distribution or like, some of these facilities that you connect people with, have you seen COVID impact you guys, or being online, has that insulated you guys a bit? So, I mean, last year sales were up. I mean, obviously that was helpful. The downside is a lot of the factories had to, reduce hours or close or, luckily we have redundancies in every product category. So we actually weren't affected pretty much at all, last year. And then we have our own production too here in South Dakota, and, it's the land of the free here. So nothing will stop us from working, but yeah, it was difficult. But yeah, we definitely saw, I mean, it really changed our perception on kind of who our customer is and who the future customer is, because a lot of, regular people that aren't, marketing professionals or big brands, got into e-commerce as something to do / additional income. And so it really shaped kind of who we feel our new customer is going to be going forward. So it's really interesting.
Yeah. And then is your team, are you guys remote? Are you guys in office? I mean, what does that look like?
So we have some remote. We have an office here in South Dakota. We have an office in Lebanon. And then we have a small factory in Utah. So yeah, we're kind of all over the place.
Okay, cool. Whenever you talk to people who are struggling, because you're talking about sort of what I envision is like kind of the 2021 version of a business's like work professional, like where they come from, in that some of your office is remote, some of you are in office. There's a growing conversation of coming from business owners who really hate the remote world that we're in. And even some bosses out there who are listening now who are really pushing to try to get their people back in the office. It's hard for some people to think about remote work. How do you manage your people? How do you keep people all focused and doing what they're doing when they're not necessarily physically present where you are?
I mean, luckily there's a lot of tools out there that's really simple. I mean, obviously if they're going to goof off, I mean, you can't see that every second of every day, but between Slack and Jira and other apps, I mean, we know what they're outputting. So obviously if they're not outputting what you think they're outputting, then there might be some funny business. But really, I mean, it takes the right employee, who thrives in a remote environment. Some people are very like collaborative and need to, sit next to somebody, and then other people have, need that almost like that threat of someone looking over their shoulder to keep focused. So I don't know. I mean, luckily our crew hasn't had any real issues with that. So for the near future, it's going to be whatever they're most comfortable with. So did
you just hire really well? I mean, what are you doing as a boss that makes it?
No, I think the people that we hired remote are used to working remote. So it's just one of those things where I think a lot of people have the issue when they're used to sitting in an office and then became remote.
Yeah, sure.
You kind of find the people who aren't suited for that versus if you've always worked remote because you live in a small town in Oregon or something, like that's just, you're used to it and you've kind of developed good habits that allow it to be successful. So.
Well, I mean, I'm assuming you probably find yourself giving all sorts of advice to people, whether it's, hiring remote employees or what have you. For people who are just starting out, because I think you made a really great point that with COVID, I mean, some people lost their jobs. Other people are rethinking, okay, do I really want to go work in this office again? And so we're seeing a really big boom to entrepreneurship in the startup world. What kind of advice do you have for that brand new entrepreneur who's bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, who maybe even on social media, they've seen the ads of people who were like, you can start. I literally just saw one today that was, I won't say the person's name, but I kind of cringed. But he basically said, how to start a $5 million business in 90 days from nothing. And I thought like, oh my gosh, like the poor entrepreneur who's thinking like, I'm going to do that. What kind of advice do you have for these optimistic people who are starting their businesses for the first time?
Yeah, just go slow. A lot of people want to be like, okay, let's quit my job. Let's put $10,000 in the Facebook ads. Like that doesn't work. I mean, unless you really understand how to do it, you're just going to lose all your money pretty quickly. So like I tell people, go slow, try to sell to people, like I think you'd be very surprised at your circle of friends and family, how much stuff they're buying online. And all you got to do is create the products that they would want to buy. And then just hit them up. I feel like, if you did stuff we use MLM as a bad example, but it's basically, it's direct selling. Yeah, but you got to have a product that is reasonable and it's something they actually need. It's nothing that's overpriced, skincare, whatever. It's just something that if you're going to go and buy a customized canvas with your family's face on it from, X website, just buy it from my website. Like we've seen a lot of really good stories of, I'm not saying you're going to get $1 million overnight, but you want to make, $200,000, $500,000 a month. Like that's very achievable, with the tools that exist Teelaunch and Shopify and Etsy but again, don't start with running ads. Like, you don't know what you're doing. Go very slow. Get a base, understand the business. Because that's why I think it's so sad is these people that they'll burn out so quickly.
Yeah.
Oh, my budget was, I'm going to give this business 2 months and $10,000. And then they blow $10,000 in a month. I say I'm all out of money. I still know what I'm doing. And they give up and quit. But if you kind of just make a store, just try to sell, a few things here and there to people really understand the business. It's just a much better, safer approach.
It feels like I hear so many stories of people who are like their first step was Facebook ads. And I guess nothing against Facebook advertising, but it's amazing. I literally just talked to someone yesterday who he had no customers, like zero. He had just started his business, but he had already spent like $6,000 on Facebook ads and was like, what do I do? Do I need to change my niche? And I was like, why did you go to Facebook? But I feel like that is a commonality between new business owners.
I think there's a lot of courses out there that's what they teach them is like, oh, I can teach you to spend $5 a day and become profitable on Facebook. It's just and that was true in the old days, 5 years ago, it's probably, you could have easily done that. But now, iOS 14 and all the different things with Facebook, you got to just go slow.
Yeah.
Go really, really slow. And again, I think it's weird that people don't ask people that already, so basically you have to build, someone has to like you and trust you to buy something from you. So why are you going after random people when there's all these people you already know? Like, it just seems very odd that people kind of, and I don't know if it's a pride thing, or they don't want to think they're begging their friends and family for help. But you just explain to them what you're doing, explain to them why it's important. They're going to want to support you. So
it feels like it's also a bit of a, I don't know if it's like a rejection thing. Like when you first start your business, like it's a lot to put yourself out there. Right. And so I've talked to a number of people who, they'll go to Google, they'll go to advertising, they'll do whatever they can just to avoid, like I was talking to a guy who was asking about my business, and it's like your story. I said, well, I just got out there and started meeting people. And he's like, okay, how do I avoid doing that though? Like, how do I not have to, I don't really want to talk to anyone. I just want to sell it. And so I don't know if it's like avoiding rejection or what it is, but it definitely feels like running a business. You have to get really comfortable with rejection and harsh feedback and, all those sorts of things.
Yeah. I got to develop a tough skin, which I'm a bad example because I still get, sad by that kind of stuff, but you just have to get used to it because it's just, there's no way it's going to ever, this is part of business. There's no way you're going to, speak in marketing or person to people that always want your product like you. And then unfortunately too, people have gotten a bit more cynical on the internet. Things they'd say to you, in a Facebook message is much different than things they'd say to your face. So you just got to try and let it bug in. Yeah, it's definitely part of the business. So definitely.
Yeah. So what's next for Teelaunch? What are you guys working on next? What's taking up most of your time? You've been in business 8 years. What's the next 8 years look like?
So we actually just redid our entire app. Took almost 2 years and $500,000, and we just finished it in May. And so now we get to start working on the fun stuff. So before, the app, it makes the product for you. It sends it to the Shopify or Etsy. Everything's automated on the back end. Like, it did what it's supposed to do, but it doesn't help you sell. It doesn't help make you money. And so the new crop of things we're working on are aimed at that. So we're really excited about machine learning as it pertains to image manipulation. So basically taking a photo of your family and doing, turn it into a cartoon or turn you into a superhero. And there's some amazing things you can do now with machine learning. So we call it the personalizer that really helps kind of create, because right now personalization is hot. That's the biggest section in print on demand because there's no way to do a picture of your family on a pillow one at a time beyond using print on demand. So it's really hot. But then the problem is if you take just a stock photo that you had on your phone and put it on a pillow, like, that's great, but it's not really art. It's not really, we didn't do anything to it. And so what we're trying to figure out now is these other tools to make it really obvious and kind of like simple to take, help our customers sell these personalized products. So that's the next thing. And then we have a whole bunch of new products because we have, this dual business of, we have the technology we need to build to make everything work, but then we also have production where we're introducing new products that no one else is doing. That's one of the things we do really well is we'll find products that people aren't already offering because black shirts and white mugs, you can only sell so many of those. And so that's why I've gotten into these kind of crazy products because it just helps. It helps to, something different that I haven't seen before on Facebook or TikTok or whatever. This helps get clicks and helps you sell better. So.
Exciting stuff. one last question, Christopher. What's the best kind of pizza?
Pepperoni.
I feel like you'd be the one to know, right? I mean,
It's been, we did 28 years of pizza, but I'm a real plain guy, so I'm not the one to ask.
keep it simple, right?
Yeah.
So, well, Christopher, it's been great having you on the podcast today. What's the best way for people to check out Teelaunch?
Yep. So just go to teelaunch.com. You'll see all the different integrations we have, and you can make an account and see all the different products. And then if you have any questions for me, just Christopher@teelaunch.com.
Great. Christopher, thanks for being on the podcast today. I appreciate it.
Thanks, buddy.
Hey, for our listeners, I'm going to put the link to the website down in the episode description below. It's teelaunch.com. That's TEE launch.com. Also, make sure you check out their app and be sure to check out some of the cool, fun products they actually have on the website, including this awesome bath mat that I mentioned earlier. As always, if you enjoy the podcast, what the heck are you waiting on? Click that subscribe button, click the follow buttons, and keep getting good advice wherever you're at. And don't forget, if you love the podcast, you want to support the podcast, you can jump on our Patreon. It's at patreon.com/goodadvice. That's patreon.com/goodadvice. And as always, we appreciate you. Thanks for checking out the podcast. We'll catch you later. See ya.